college. It took me a little bit longer than some people. But I was in my last year of college at the University of Wisconsin when my good friend Miranda, who I'd spent 3 years with serving as a camp counselor in Iowa, called me up and said that she was passing through where I lived, and could she come and spend the night and visit me at my apartment. Of course, I said, come. We'll put some sheets on the couch for you and you can spend the night. Come, it would be great to see you. I couldn't wait to see Miranda. She and I had walked and talked with each other through exhausting weeks of shepherding teenagers through their intense faith exploration at camp for 3 summers. We climbed into the car for road trips across Iowa, debating God as we passed cornfields and highway exit signs. We had laughed ourselves silly one night in the hospital emergency room, waiting for our friend Jess to get 5 stitches in her big toe. Miranda is as tall as I am and a little bit more muscular. She might even be taller than me. But as soon as she came into my apartment that evening when she came to visit me, and we sat down at the dining table and began to catch up on what was going on in our lives, it seemed like she started to shrink before me. She drew in a little bit on herself as she said, Kristin, I don't know what to do anymore. Something has happened. I can't believe anymore. I find myself unable to pray or even say any words to God anymore. It's like there's a blockade set up within me or in front of me. I feel lost and helpless. I want to believe in God. And I believe that God still exists, but I can't get close to God anymore. I don't feel anything. It's like I'm being tossed around on the wind. What should I do? We talked about what happened that brought her to this place of frustration and this place of helplessness. But as much as I wanted to that evening, I couldn't wave my hand or open up my mouth and say some magic words to make it all better for her. Faith doesn't really work like that. So I said the only words that I could believe in that moment. Words that seemed to come from somewhere else and that I didn't really fully understand myself until this past week that I have been through. Miranda, I said as night tipped over into morning. That sucks. I can't fix it for you. I wish I could so badly. But I will pray for you now when you can't pray. And I'm going to believe for you now when you can't believe until your faith returns to you. We're going to be in this together. Like I said, I didn't really understand the power of that promise I made to Miranda that late night in Madison so many years ago until I went through this past week of my life. When I felt like I was being tossed around like I'm riding the waves of a heaving ocean in a hurricane. When I felt abandoned by the God who I trust. Because as you know, as was announced last week, my husband Eugene, who I married a little bit less than a year ago, died of something so treatable as high blood sugar and a chest infection last week. The pain and the heartache of this past week was not the image I had in mind when I prayed to God before we got engaged, asking if this relationship was good and was right. This was not the future that he and I had hoped to live together. And this isn't the hope that I felt coming from you as I shared with you wedding pictures and heard the excitement and the anticipation that you wanted to welcome Eugene into this community. This death is not the gift of love that I had received when Eugene grabbed my hand on the way to the airport 2 years ago and said, Chris, I I'm falling in love with you. Instead, it feels like a cruel trick of God. And it's been nearly impossible to believe in the promise or the hope of a God of love and of life all by myself, or if it's left up to me and my own efforts or ability to believe. But thankfully, I haven't had to grasp onto the promises of God by myself. I haven't had to struggle to believe in the hope of the resurrection of the dead all on my own. Because as I look out at all of you gathered here this morning, as I have received your hugs through this past week, as I've eaten the wonderful meals brought to my house, and most of all, as I've leaned on your prayers, I trust that you still believe. And that at this time when I cannot believe, that you can believe for me. Because I can't do it by myself. And that is the beauty and the gift of the church. That is the joy and the hope that we heard even from Paul this morning in the letter that he wrote to the Romans in a small and struggling church in Rome. That none of us, no matter what struggle, what catastrophe, or what death comes our way, no matter how much this world is shaking, none of us is in this alone. And none of us walk in faith all by ourselves. Instead, when we need to believe in the promise of the resurrection the most, but cannot, we can instead look around. We can join in singing hymns, or if we need to, just listen to the voices of our neighbors singing hymns of faith. We can sit with one another and look to the person next to us. We can be claimed and held by all those who gather in this church and in all the churches around the world, and become the living flesh and blood of the resurrected Christ for each other. When we are church, when we are brothers and sisters to one another, we become the resurrected Christ for one another and for a world so in need. And so this morning, after a week of upheaval and catastrophe, I add my voice to Paul's, who was writing to a people struggling to believe in Rome. And I echo his words as I need to say to you this morning that I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith has been proclaimed throughout the world. Or if that seems a little bit grandiose as we sit here in Nutley, I thank my God for all of you this week. I thank you for the gift of being brothers and sisters in faith who have reached out to me this week and believed in the resurrection for me, who have helped me to believe and to remember that God is faithful to God's promises. Just as I hope and pray that in the weeks ahead, when you will be tossed about in the churning waters of uncertainty and upheaval, that I can reach out to you, that we can continue to reach out to each other and believe for you as well. Because of Christ's resurrection, my dear beloved husband Eugene's death is not the end. The destruction and the death of 7,000 people in Nepal is not the end. The struggle and cries of outrage and injustice from our brothers and sisters in Baltimore is not the end. Despair and darkness never again get to have the last say. For God has given to us the power of the gospel for which we cannot be ashamed. Because in the face of death, God resurrected Jesus Christ to new life and shared it with each and every one of us, so that together, never ever alone again, We may trust in God's power to save us and bring us back from death and into new life again one day. And for that, I can only say thanks be to God and thanks be to you.